evening, and thank you everybody for coming. Few words of introduction. I'm Mark Ayachi. I'm a graduate at the Hebrew University, and I'm involved with the British Friends and the Hebrew University. But more important is, this year is actually the 10th anniversary of my grandmother's death, who was very involved with the Friends. She was the governor of the university. She was an honorary fellow. And as a Belgian governor, one of the things she did was she organized pretty much her entire life. She organized lectures. She brought professors from the Hebrew University to help them to showcase the breadth of talent at the university. And she would have continued for another 200 years. Basically, only got to a fraction of the talent at the university, and that's really what the British Friends are also all about, showing what the university is all about. And tonight we have really the honor of having Haruv Ben-Arieh here, who's the dean of the School of Social Science, Social Work, sorry, and who tonight's going to be talking about the incredible work that he does together with his team, and particularly over the last 18 months, it's been changed, and it's widened in terms of the scope, and I think there's a lot to talk about tonight, and we're really very fortunate to have him here tonight, and let's listen and learn and ask questions. Thank you.
It's not a topic I'm happy to talk about. I'm really honored and happy to be here. I told some of you that in many aspects, London was my second home. So my father was also a professor at the university and the director of the university in the 90s. I've done his postdoc and all his sabbaticals in London. As a child, I grew up in this vicinity. We lived for 1 year in St. John's Wood, and then we moved to Hampstead and other places. And for me, it's always good coming back to London. And I'm going to talk about children in the aftermath of October 7 and the considerable work we have done. And I'll start by sharing with you a personal story that Nigel heard this morning. On October 6th, of all places in the world, I was in Churchill, Manitoba, Canada. I know anybody knows where Churchill, Manitoba is. It's 2 hours flight north from Winnipeg. It's then the polar bear capital of the world. And the reason I was in Churchill, Manitoba is that on my 60th birthday wish list or bucket list, I wanted to see polar bears in nature, not in the zoo. And I went once to Spitsbergen in Svalbard in Norway, and I didn't see them. So I flew to Churchill, Manitoba, and I saw the polar bear from 15 meters. Luckily, I was in an SUV. Saw the polar bear, and we saw the Northern Light. And on October 6th, we went to celebrate it in one of the only 2 restaurants in Churchill, Manitoba. None of them, there is a lot to say about. But we celebrated it and we went to sleep, planning to start flying back on Saturday to other places in the United States and to Israel. And at midnight, I was waken up by my older son, said, open the TV, come back, because my younger son was still a combat soldier in the army and he was called back to Gaza. And we started schlepping back. On the way, don't remember the exact date, I think it was the 2nd or the 3rd day, I was still trying to find flights to Israel. I got a phone call from the Ministry of Social Service. First time ever in my 35 years working on child welfare issues in Israel that I acted as a minister and not as a bureaucrat. They phoned me and said, look, they are kidnapped children. We don't have a clue what to do. We hope one day they will come back. Would you sit down and develop the knowledge for us, the protocol, how to deal with the hostage children? And my answer is yes. And then he said, but we don't have any resources to pay you. I said, I don't care about the resources, we'll do it. And the Haruv Institute, which is an institute within the academically affiliated with the Hebrew University, and the experts of the School of Social Work started writing protocols. We ended up writing 12 different protocols. There is 4 of them mentioned here, 4 populations we dealt with, but there was many more. First of all, the children who were kidnapped. We had 40 children who were kidnapped. 38 of them came back. 2 were murdered in captivity and came back only recently. Then we said, okay, but there are other populations we don't know how to deal with. And the second population is children who witnessed atrocity. We have children who witnessed atrocity on October 7th. We have almost 20,000 kids in Israel who were recognized as victims of terrorism by the National Insurance Institute. There are probably many more that didn't approach the National Insurance Institute. 37% of them were under the age of 6, and 38 children were murdered. Then we talked about children who lost both their parents. And we had more. Those are only those who lost both their parents. It doesn't include those that one parent was murdered and the other parent was kidnapped. Didn't exist in the children's life. About 116 children were orphaned. 20 of them lost both their parents. 96 lost one. And then the biggest group of children were displaced, both from the south and the north. More than 110,000 people were displaced. At the beginning, it was much more, and then some of them came back. 48,000 kids were displaced immediately and taken from their environment, and we'll talk about it a little bit more. So they came to us and build us protocols, and we said, okay, we had two conditions. The first condition was that if we are going to write a protocol for the kidnapped children, we want to talk about, again, it's not whatever you've done. Turn it back.
Need to have both it turning and it not being on the.
Whatever. So
There we go.
our condition said, okay, if you want us to develop the protocol for the kidnapped children, we want to have access to everybody that would deal with the children.
Sorry, can I just have the other slide for 2 seconds? I'd like.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
And we said, and they said, of course, you can talk with the social workers and train them. And I said, no, I'm just as much interested with the Shabak, the Shin Bet interrogators who would meet the kids in Egypt, because we need to train them also, because the right, if they would say something not in place for a child who came back out of captivity, it will take us months to correct it later on. So, and 3 weeks before the first child came back, we've done a training, all the Shabak in the Shabak headquarters in Tel Aviv, for all the interrogators that met the kids. What did we learn about the children who were hostages? And we are still escorting all of them. I can start with the worst part that I can share with you. None of the kids started psychotherapy till today. They are unwilling to start psychotherapy as long as there are hostages in Gaza.
The thing for the adults.
Definitely the adolescents and the adults are the same. And the younger kids didn't start it because their parents are unwilling that they would start any psychotherapy as long as they're hostages in Gaza. What did we learn from the kids who came back? We are still escorting what we have done. We've convinced all the kids, the 38 kids who came back, we convinced them instead of psychotherapy to have a mentor. And we are escorting the mentors. So what did we learn? The condition in captivity varied. Some of them had better conditions, some of them had worse conditions. Some of them had even some good memories for some of the terrorists to capture them. And one of them told us that she remembered that he asked her which kind of candy she likes, and he brought her the candy to one of the young kids. But then what we also know that all the 38 kids went under various forms of abuse and neglect. All of them went through emotional abuse. All of them went through medical neglect, inadequate nutrition, physical abuse, and many of them went through sexual. I cannot tell you anything more. Every time when I'm interviewed, people say, can you tell me more about the sexual abuse? I said, no, because the moment I'll tell you, there were only 38 kids. And everybody knows who the kids were. If I tell you the age of what happened, then you will know who is the kid is. And this is something you shouldn't do. This is one of my biggest, for me, it's one of the biggest disgrace of the Ministry of Health in Israel, that they published a report on the status of children who came back. And all the kids in the envelope of Gaza knew exactly who they're telling, even though they didn't mention the name. Because they said, you know, a 14-year-old girl. There were 2 girls who were in captivity with somebody else or whatever. What held them in captivity? Which is also something we learned. Significant others. Not only their families, but significant others. There was one kid, Oad Mundlok, who was held alone for 15 days, and then he was brought to an Israeli hostage woman who was his not kindergarten, nursery take care in the kibbutz. So she took care of him. There is another story, not so nice. One of the hostages who was killed, Itai Swirsky, took care of 3 kids. And when he later on, when they came back, and then the news came that he was murdered in a bomb or something, the kids insisted on sitting Shiva. They said he was our father in the captivity. And there are other stories which I won't tell now. And then the personal resilience and the adaptive response. You know, it's also like in child maltreatment. People are saying fight or flight. Those who are professionals in the field know we expect the children to fight. But sometimes the children are smarter than us. They know that if they would not fight, it will end faster. So some of the kids knew that if they would smile to the terrorist to capture them, he will treat them better. And then they came back and they had, you know, guilt. What else did we learn? Children who witnessed atrocities. One of the things we are most proud of is that we've done a legislative change within 3 weeks. Anybody who knows the Israeli legislation process 3 weeks. In Israel, if you're a victim of child abuse and neglect, you are interrogated by a special child investigator. If you're under the age of 14, who is a social worker, not a police officer. If you're a victim of terror attack, you're interrogated by the Shabak or a police officer because you need to build a case against the terrorist. We said that victims of terror attacks need to be interrogated also by special social workers that know how to speak with them. Within 3 weeks, we changed the law. We've done the training for them. We wrote the protocol for them. And the Shabak representative was sitting in the second room and hearing everything, and he wanted more information. He could ask the child investigator to ask the information, but that's something we've changed dramatically. We have a problem with social workers in various contexts. The problem is that all the social workers themselves were misplaced. Many of them lost their family members. All of them lost members of or friends or others that they know, and they had to deal with the children who witnessed atrocities. The education system till today didn't adapt itself to what is happening with those children. I'll give you some stories in a few minutes. And the parents themselves lost their friends, their relatives, the people who lived in them in the community, grew up with them, and now we expect them to be strong and support the kids, which is something we will talk about in a few minutes. Children who lost both their parents is another major challenge. We have, unfortunately, still 3 cases that are in the court right now, because the extended family from both sides is fighting who will grow the children. And you say, can't you solve it? No, they cannot. Each one of them is sure that he's doing what his daughter or son wanted them to do. And 2 cases came to court. There were 4 or 5 bitter struggles. 3 of them we managed to convince the both sides that it's better for the children and for them to let it go, and we found solution. 2 of them insisted on going to court. And we developed guidelines also for care and treatment of those children. And then we had evacuated communities. I still remember me saying after a month, interviewed in the radio, and they asked me and I said, you know, if we won't deal with those evacuees in the hotels, it's going to be a disaster. And I can tell you that pedophiles came to those hotels and looked for children. And when I said it on the radio, so the host said, how could you say it? I don't believe any pedophile would come. Yeah. So I told her, well, the day before there was a famous incident where some thieves from Ben-Arieh went to the Nova site and steal equipment. So I said, if thieves are going to steal equipment, why do you think the pedophile won't come to do what he wants to do? And who told you that among the evacuees there are not pedophiles? Or people who shouldn't be with their kids alone, and we put all the kids together in one apartment or one room, and you need to solve them, and then you see some quotes of some of the children later on. Now, what happened with the evacuated communities, which is the largest group? First of all, they moved to temporary housing. The dissolution of the familiar social frameworks, you know, the places they knew, their friends from the other kibbutz were not together anymore, and there was no protection. No protection. And at the first days, everybody wanted to volunteer. Everybody went to the hotel, including people who didn't have a clue about what's trauma. Everybody became an expert in trauma. You know, everybody who took a CBT course of 3 meetings became an expert on trauma. Everybody rushed to the hotels, and then they discovered that this is real trauma. Not everybody could deal with it. By the way, it happened to us also with some of the best psychotherapists with the kidnapped children. We made it clear, we built a list for the families, and each family choose which ones they want to deal with because it's a free will. But we had the condition to get into the list, you need to be willing to follow up with this family for at least a year and wherever they want. And it took about a month when some of them said, well, it's too hard, and they moved to the south, and if they want me to continue, they need to come to my clinic, and so on. So it happened also with some of the professionals, let alone with those who came. Now, all the relevant community, you know, we know what helps children deal with trauma from research. All the relevant communities, the family, the school, the friends, and the housing, all of it disappeared. And you move to new places, sometimes without part of your families, either because they were in the service or they were murdered, or they continue to go to work, and you stayed alone in the Dead Sea or Elat or wherever you want. Your friend from the school, which came from different kibbutzim or different moshavim, each one was sent somewhere else, and you couldn't see your friends. In school, dissolved to 5 different schools, and the housing was totally different. So you had your own corner. You had, you knew that if your parents annoy you and you're a teenager, you could go to the horses, or you could go to this place in the kibbutz or this place in the moshav and hang out. You don't have it in a hotel. And all of those things disappeared. All of this led me, about a month after October 7, to be among the first one to say that we are dealing with a new form of trauma. It's not more of the same, it's not more severe, but in the same guideline. It's something totally new. And unfortunately, too many professionals were unwilling to admit that they don't know. And the reason they don't know is because of the elements. You know, when I talk about child maltreatment, one of the areas I work on, you say that the trauma because of child maltreatment is different from the trauma because of the road accident. And the reason it's different is because of the betrayal element. The fact that the people who hurt you are the people who were supposed to safeguard you. On October 7, we have an element at least of failure, if not betrayal. We told the kids that if they will do 1, 2, 3, nothing will happen to them. And they have done exactly that, and the world collapsed. Now try to rebuild trust in the adult world. They won't. Trust them. Tell you a story about the high school in Nofei Absor, which is the regional council of the school. A 12th grader went to physically hit a 10th grader that bullied his sister in the 9th. So the principal stopped him on the way. Said, why are you using violence and why didn't you come to speak with me? So the 12th grader told you, because after October 7, I don't believe any of you. If it wasn't for me and my father holding the door of the safe room, we would have been killed. So I don't trust any of you now. Try to rebuild trust or mechanism of support or whatever else. Then there was the adaptive responses that some of the kids and some of the hostel kids feel guilty. Stockholm people, we are talking about people. The negative self-attribution and the living trauma. The fact that we don't know cases of acute trauma that continues for 18 months. So everybody refers to the Holocaust. That's true. But the knowledge we gained from the Holocaust, after the Holocaust, is not close to the knowledge we have today. But it's an acute trauma that continues for 18 months, and then the displacement. All the system of support were dissolved because of the evacuation and the displacement. So they lost all the resilience factor. They lost their home, they lost their community, they lost their familiar places, they lost their friends. And in this situation, we are dealing with a new trauma. And anybody that thinks that we know how to deal with it, I think is not has nothing to do with bravery, but it's not professional for me, but there's something we don't know. if we build more resilience center, which we are trying to do, that's great because it's very important and we needed more resilience center before October 7th. But nobody guarantees that the resilience center will solve the problems of those people. It's something totally different that we didn't face. And then we went to children and spoke with them. Nobody spoke with the children. If I'll sum it up in a moment, I would say that all the children said, I won't go through all of it, but basically what the children told us, both the evacuees in the north and the evacuees in the south, we made focus group, we went to them and talked with them, and they said, everybody hears us, nobody listens to us. And I'll give you one example, a positive example. The regional council of Eshkol, the one that suffered the most, decided that the 12th grader needs to go to school in December, 2 months after October 7th. And they told the kids, okay, you are going back to school. They're going to 4 different schools. Those who live in Eilat will go to this half school in Eilat, and those in the Detzin. And the 12th graders said, forget about it. Either we go back together, all of us, or we are not going. So the professional told them, it's none of your business, we decide. So the kids said, okay, you could decide what you want, we are not coming. And together with 2 of the parents, they got organized, and it took them 3 days to move the Ministry of Education to open a special boarding school for the 12th graders in En-Gedi, where all of them were brought together from all over the country. The only mistake was that they should have done it sooner, and the other bigger mistake is that they didn't do it for the 11 and 10 graders also, and they separated them. So the kids know what they want, and they are saying it all the time. So I'll jump through that because it's less important. The children who evacuated, of course, worried more than children were not evacuated, and it was true in all the areas. But I'll jump to this, to the invisibility. It feels like you have to shout for someone to hear. No one really notices, and no one comes to ask you, like, is everything all right? That's a quote about the children, which is true, by the way, also to the professionals. I think I told somebody today, I don't remember who. I went to one of the schools. I have a habit, whenever I meet somebody from the envelope Gaza, I drive there. I never meet them in Zoom, and I never ask them to come to Tel Aviv or Jerusalem, which most of the professionals still do. So I came to the school. This was the school in Yad Mordechai, which is a kibbutz on the northern tip of the Gaza envelope. Nobody was murdered in that kibbutz. There was a first fight in the entrance gate, but people in that school lost family members in other settlements in that council. And I came to the principal. I said, look, I don't want to sell you anything. I don't want money from you. I don't want anything. Tell me what you need. I'm here to help you. So he didn't understand what I'm saying. He was astonished. He called his deputy. He's new. He came from Jordan. He was new there, volunteered to take the role. He called his deputy. His deputy came. And I told her the same thing. And she started crying. Literally started crying. He said, look, what I really need is I need support groups for parents. Are you willing to do it? And I said, yes, tell me when and where, and I'll send somebody to run the support group. So he said, you know what's the problem? Everybody tells me when I tell them I need support groups for parents, they tell me, we will advise you how to do it. And she said, but I myself was evacuated, and there is so much on my plate, and nobody is willing to help. So they are still invisible. Both the adults and especially the children. Then the privacy. The privacy, anybody who knows about children's rights, which is another topic I'm studying, knows that the right that is most important for children is privacy. They are really keen about that privacy. And what they said, we lost our privacy. We have no private place to go. So one of them said, you see, I tied the lace of the rope between the door and the railing so that no one can open it. So there is no privacy for a minute at all. So she locks the door and ties it so nobody could open the door without knocking and asking her to untie the lace that she tied. The issue of privacy was dramatic for those children. And on another story, I can tell you on a family that was evacuated from Kiryat Shmona to Jerusalem, and the parents were in the midst of a first divorce battle. But they didn't finish the divorce battle, so they put it in the same room. And it took me personally a day and a half to convince them that you could not put the two in the same room. Because they didn't finalize the divorce. And children say the consequence on war on social relations. And some of them became stronger friends, some of them lost many of their friends. And they say we are more connected in some things, we are less connected in others, but nobody really speaks with them. I'll tell you another story. When we started building the protocol, we said, okay, we want to build more. And I said, I want to build a protocol on helping children who lost their friends. So the first time the Ministry of Social Services became back, the ministry I knew, the old ministry, said, we don't need it. And I said, I don't ask you, you don't need it, we do it without you. In any case, you are not paying me. And then we brought all the social workers from the Gaza envelope, from the 3 regional councils that were affected, to a training day in Mount Scopus, in the Haruv campus. And it was a very interesting day because in order to train them, we had to do also a day camp for the kids because they were unwilling, the social workers were unwilling to come without their kids. So I recruited 3 of my staff and said, okay, today you are doing day camp and the rest will do the training. So they came and we asked them what's missing. And the first thing they said is missing is the protocol on how to help kids who lost their friends. So the Minister of Social Services, the Director General said, okay, you were right. Right. But think about it, for a 15 or 16-year-old boy or girl to lose their boyfriend or a girlfriend, or just a friend that grew up on them from age 0. Sometimes it's harder than losing a sibling. It's dramatic. And that's another quote. It's really important to step into our shoes, try to understand what we've been through and what we're going through, listen to our needs, ask us questions, and pay attention to us, because it's true that you've been through hard things. But think about us for a second. We still don't fully understand life and are already getting this kind of thing. Those are quotes from children, and whenever you ask children, they are much smarter. So this is October 7 and the usual suspects, as you call it. And our understanding is that we are dealing with a new form of trauma, and you need to find a way how to think out of the box and not just do more of the same. Now, luckily for me, there are 3 centers at the Hebrew University who are dealing now, 3 big centers who are trying to deal with mental health and trauma. One is funded by the Israeli Foundation and it does basic research. It's great, very important to deal with those in 10 years. We don't have 10 years to wait. We need to do the basic research, but the other one is doing evidence-based treatment. Jonathan Happert from the Department of Psychology is doing evidence-based treatment. But again, all the evidence is pre-October 7. And the third one is the center we are trying to build now, which we've opened, the School of Social Work, that is on innovation. And it's about trying to think out of the box and being willing to say, I don't know, and also saying, I'm going to fail in something. So the discussion I told in the UGA meeting that I spoke in Tel Aviv, one of the guests was from the United States, Paul Singer, who is a big hedge fund guy, and he came to me and said, "Okay, would you, if I'll fund you beyond the Resilience Center I'm giving money, can you guarantee it work?" And I said, "How can I guarantee which I don't know what it is?" So I said, "Okay, can you promise me that the government will continue?" I said, "How could I promise that the government will continue which I don't know what it is and the government knows?" I said, "Then how do you expect me to fund it?" I said, first of all, I hope you'll fund me. And second, I had this brilliant idea that really resonated. Think about it as a hedge fund. When you will invest in a hedge fund, you know that 8 out of the 10 startup companies would fail. And you invest in order to get the 1 or 2 would succeed. So he said, it's a great example. I understand what you say, but it didn't fund. But we got the money from other places. But then we are talking about 3 new challenges that we are facing today that people are starting to ignore. Not starting, I'm still ignoring. First of all, is the integration of communities. There's 2 famous ones. One is Ben-Arieh, Kibbutz Ben-Arieh, who went to live in Hatzerim. Second, that people speak less about is Kfar Aza, who moved to live in Ruchama. It's the same regional council. Ruchama this year opened for the first time a primary school in the kibbutz, and just opening a primary school for your own community is a big issue. They got Kfar Aza inside. They didn't have a clue how to integrate, what's right, what's wrong. We are working very hard on it together with one of the faculty members of the School of Social Work, who is the expert on community rehabilitation, Professor Orna Shemer, and we are trying. But that's an issue that nobody speaks about. They say, okay, Hatzerim, most Be'eri, and everything is fine. But I'll give you one example of a big challenge there. They decided that the kids of Be'eri will go with the kids of Hatzerim to a different regional school, except the 12th graders, which are bused to the old school with all their friends. But the 11th graders in Tegel said, we don't want to go there. We want to go with our friends. So now it's divided. Some of them are going to that school, some are going to the other school. And we have a new phenomenon. Adolescents in the regional council of a school who sleep alone. In Be'eri, there is a community of almost 20 adolescents who sleep there without any adult supervision. Nobody knows about them. And when I approached the Ministry of Social Services, I said, do something. You could not. I said, they are allowed to do it. Their parents allowed it. I said, I don't want you to force them to go to the parents. Put a guy there, somebody that would be there, just sit there. And even worse than that, our kids are every day sleeping in another place. Their parents are in total disarray. So they finish school and say, okay, today we go back to my parents. The day after, they say, okay, today I'll go with my friends to these kids. They totally lost control on what's happening. And that's the words of the principle of that. Every day kids are going, I don't know where they're. So that's one thing. The children living alone. The third one, which we are only starting to deal with, is the children of the reserve center. You know, I've done my share in reserve, in the army. In 1 year, I've done 120 days, but it wasn't combat, it was 120 days. There are people now who are doing 300, 400 days, 200 days in combat. We have kids who wake up in the morning, and the first thing they ask their mother, did daddy die tonight or not? And nobody speaks about it. And it's a huge amount of kids, huge amount. And in our innovation center, we had a meeting last week with students, because this year we want the students to come up with ideas. This year, we had to start, so the faculty came with ideas from the task forces. And one of the students from business school, because it's not only for social work, came and said, I came here because we need to speak about the people who are doing reserve, and those who are doing reserve not in combat. He said, I'm not in a combat, but all my life, bro, I've done 300 days and I'm not fighting, so nobody gives me anything, nobody looks on me, but somebody needs to speak with me to see what's happening. So this is a new thing that we didn't even start to think about in Israel, and it's growing. The number of kids is growing. So I talked about those three things, and then the aftermath of the children living alone. In many cases, the family decided to set their answer. And then there's lots of parents, the tension between the parents and the children is growing, because as one of the secretary of the principal in Yad Mordechai told me, I said, how is life coming back to the kibbutz? He said, the only reason I came back is that my two kids told me, we are going back with you or without you. I didn't want to come back, but I couldn't let my kids go alone. So this separation, children who formally know to have returned to their place of residence, and children who are wandering all around, and parents who had to return because they're kids, or parents who had to allow their kids to stay alone, and try and deal with this tension. And about the reserves, again, families are split. The burden is on one parent, and by the way, not only the woman. When we started to deal with reserve students in the Hebrew University, in the management, they told me, okay, you are the dean of social work, you don't have a problem with research. The amount of students, female students, who are doing reserve in the most hard positions. Some of them are fighting, but others, I had the one who was responsible for casualties in Golani, in Givati, and in another fighting battalion. And they are studying social work, and they are doing reserve. So the burden on one parent, the lack of parents' availability, the uncertainty, and the concern. Children are worried about the parents, and they don't understand that even if the parent is in the intelligence and is not in a fighting combat, for them, he went to the army, and he could be killed. So to sum up, because I promised to speak not too long, we are facing a new type of trauma, and you need to be professional enough and have enough self-confidence to say, I don't know. That's the one thing. The second thing, I from the beginning told my staff, both at the school and at Haruv, stop being insulted. Too many professionals are insulted. I think I told somebody the story today. I was invited by the Kfar Aza community to come and talk with them. I said, what do you want from me? I'm a university professor. I said, no, we want you to promise us that the Haruv Institute would never leave us. So I said, okay. I live in Jerusalem, they were in Shpaim, near Herzliya. I got into my car the first time, turned the switch on, I got a phone call, don't come, we could not meet. I said, okay. Said another time, same story. Said the third time, same story. Then we said the fourth time. So my secretary came to me and said, why are you setting a new time? And I said, you need to understand those people, the way they live, every news item, every push on Ynet or others, break their worlds apart. Are they going to put the hostages? They're not going to. Are they going to be killed or not going to be killed? Stop being insulted. And too many professionals are insulted. And you need to understand that they are in total disarray. You know, they could not get organized. You know, I raised some money for the regional council of course to build a mobile unit that go and will talk with adolescents and help them. And they didn't use the money. They are incapable of finding somebody who would run the project. So some people are starting to blame them. I said, how could you blame them? Every day they still have people they know in captivity. So it's not more of the same. It's not just the same type of trauma, but more severe. It's something totally new. And therefore the familiar methods and tools are not enough. We are the startup nation, or at least we want the startup nation. We need to think creatively. We need to think out of the box, and we need to invent new ways. And if we won't do it, won't happen. That's what we are trying to do. We're trying to build this National Center for Innovation in Children Resilience, Children and Families Resilience. Every lecture, the title changes a bit. Basically, we are beginning a process, and the process is based more than anybody else on the undergraduate students. And then people come and ask me, why the undergraduate? Why not the master level, the PhD, the professional? I said, because the undergraduate are the one who are insisting on inventing the wheel each time. And that's what we needed. We have the task force who are working on various issues. We are trying to enhance innovation and to risk failure. And I'm telling all my funders, we raised enough money to run it for 4 years, and we are working on our endowment so it to run forever, because you could not really be creative if your money ends in a way. You need to have the freedom to think. And we started it this October, and then in June they are presenting the first task force are presenting their ideas, and then God forbid, some people in the university don't like when I say the practical aspect of taking that, translating it into practical guidelines and training professionals in the field is something the university doesn't know. And everybody needs to do what is good. It's a joint effort between the university and the Haruv Institute, which is academically affiliated with the Hebrew University, but it's an independent NGO with experts on developing protocols and training professionals. Finished on time? Answer any questions, please.
This issue of kids living on their own is horrifying. I saw it myself when I was in Tiberias, and I saw in a hotel a bunch of girls, 14 to 16-year-olds, who had been displaced from Kiryat Shmona, I think.
Yeah.
And you know, it's 9, 10 o'clock at night, and they don't seem to have any parental supervision. There are some wonderful NGOs that have stepped in and helped, and I want to know if you work with any of them. I mean, we saw, for example, an organization called Nirim, who were there working with them.
Yeah.
You're talking about innovative solutions. They seem to be coming up with some solutions. They seem to be trained.
Yeah, but it's different. First of all, the answer is yes. We work with Nirim, I know them very well. We work with many others, and there's lots of good initiatives. The difference is that you are talking about children who were evacuated.
Yes.
And they at least formally live with their parents.
They were nowhere to be seen.
There is no adult supervision, but they are in the hotel with their parents. They don't live there alone. And what I'm talking is a new phenomenon, is of adolescents who left their house. The parents live in Hatzerim, or in Tel Aviv, and they moved and they live alone in Ben-Arieh. Now, this is 3 times more complicated. First of all, the parents are not even in the physical vicinity, even if they are not in the mental vicinity, but they are not even in the physical vicinity. Second, they are going back to the place of the trauma, which is something. And third, there is a group of them together. Nothing good would happen from 20 kids living in Ben-Arieh alone. All of them went through the trauma of October 7. All of them lost friends or neighbors or family members, and the parents are not even physically there. Now, there are models. So the way we operate in our creativity, in each task force, there is 4 to 10 students, 2 to 3 professionals from the field, 1 or 2 faculty members, and 2 to 3 experts by experience. People who went through the trauma or lived in a regional council thing, and they sit together and think. Now they check what happens in other places. So we have one group who is working with the municipality of Tiberias on the role of civic society in helping in disasters. Some of it, if we find knowledge, we were the first one to look at it. You know, when we worked on the protocol for the kidnapped children, everybody speaks about the girls who were kidnapped in Nigeria, in Boko Haram. So there were about 250 kids, girls kidnapped. Half of them married their captives and stayed in the new place, and after came back, but nobody really studied it. So beyond, you know, some news articles, there's not really materials about it. But we looked. So what did we do? We interviewed prisoners of war. So the prisoner of war told us, and we implemented in the protocol of the children who came back, make sure they will have sunglasses when they come back and headphones to turn down the noise, because they were not allowed to speak even. They were allowed only to whisper something. But what we have done, each child who came back, I have pictures in a different PowerPoint, each one of them got a set of 3 sunglasses and 2 different headphones to choose. Why did they get so many to choose? Because the most important element in people who were in captivity is to regain autonomy, to let them choose. So we said, pick whichever one you want. Some of the things we made mistake. In the first day, those of you who followed the children who came back, in the first day, the parents waited for them in the hospital. Major mistake. And I signed the protocol. The day after, all the parents waited for them in the moment they crossed. So we are adapting. We are always saying we are not training anybody. We are learning together. Now, Nirim is doing something very nice. There is another organization, you should know maybe, offspring of the CPP, that is doing some work in the south. They are doing the addict treatment for parents and children who were evacuated or other. So they are, and then you need to collect that data and see what works, and whatever works, that's great. But the issue of those is something totally. Yes, Ellen.
How much funding is the government providing for therapy, children, for adults?
I would say that way.
What now?
The hostages and the children were in captivity, and some of the direct people who were influenced get as much treatment as they need, funded by the National Insurance Institute. They choose the psychotherapist if they are willing to do. They are not willing, but they choose somebody, and the National Insurance Institute pays them. What's the problem? Problem is people who were not kidnapped or lost a family member, or the second circle, as we call it, siblings of kidnapped children, not children, siblings of kidnapped adults. Parents get support, the sibling doesn't get support. Friends, so one of our innovation groups is dealing about what we call the second circle. Because people who lost friends, people who are in, some would say that all of the society of Israel is in the second or the third circle. I don't think all of them, but many of them. So we have a group that deals with children, adolescents and children who were ear witnesses to atrocities by the children who suffered the atrocities, but they didn't suffer. So think about a 16-year-old guy who was in his safe room holding it. This guy was holding the door, and he told the story to his friend. He might get some treatment, but the friend Wasn't, friend was from another kibbutz, 5 kilometers from them. But he heard the story. Nobody thinks about how to help his friend. So I said that direct people who are influenced are getting good enough services. The wider circles, the wider we go, the worse we do. Oh yeah,
Have a few, so like just some.
big one.
First of all, were the protocols ready before the first children
Yes.
returned?
Yes, but it adapted itself all the time.
Right, so I wanted to know if there were like mistakes. Well, you mentioned one of them about meeting parents.
Yeah.
And were there any of the protocols that you also adopted or also used for the second round, like of people, not children, but
Yeah, we
the
wrote
adults that
protocol.
returned?
We wrote a protocol also for young people coming back in the 20s, and we wrote a specific protocol for women coming back from captivity, even though that's not expertise. So God forbid me, I took a professor from Bar-Ilan, who is the expert on young women, Rachel Deckel, and she wrote the protocol with us. And some of my colleagues at the university said, why didn't you take us? And I said, well, we took whoever we thought is the best for that specific topic. So yes, we wrote, there were mistakes done in some of them, and we have corrected ourselves through it. The story of the parents waiting is one. The other issue, which is very, very hot topic in Israel, is should the children and the hostages came back, and especially the children, be exposed to the media only. And people come to me and said, it harms. And my argument says, it might harm them, but it's their and their parents' decision. You could not speak about regaining autonomy over your life and tell a 17-year-old, don't speak. Now, you don't need to go to the extreme. One of the child hostages who came back had an agent who organized for him interviews for payments. So I don't think you need to go there. But again, if that's what he wants, and I believe that I need to help him regain autonomy over his life, I cannot say anything. The other thing you need to know is that the terrorists didn't kidnap or murder only functional families. They kidnapped also kids from unfunctioning families. We had some severe cases of single mothers. One of them was a single father also. He was not single in life, but the other parent disappeared from the children's life, totally disappeared. One example that I still remember was an uncle of somebody who lived in Thailand for the last 20 years. And the moment his nephew came back, he started interviewing to the media in Israel. Haven't seen his nephew for 20 years. The nephew doesn't know who he is. So that was also part of people trying to capture or to come back and say there were mistakes. One, I gave you an example. The other one was the hospitals delivering by themselves too much information about some of the captives who came back. It's one thing with the captain, with the hostages saying, not the business of the physician to glorify himself and say that's what he has done. And that's the reason why our protocols, and which most of them was written by Professor Kavit Katz, who is now a member, faculty member at Hebrew University. He was in Tel Aviv and I moved there to the Hebrew University. She never interviewed. And when the pressure was too much, I took upon myself to be the buffer between her and the media. And I went and interviewed, because it's easier for me to say, I'm not going to tell you anything about the children. They large. But yes, so there were some other mistakes. Yeah. Please.
I wish you'd been around when the Grenfell fire here happened. You're certainly done with your services then. In Grenfell, there's a tower block, 75 people were burnt to death.
Yeah, I remember
all the people who, so you have the immediate trauma, but then all people who actually watch people jump out of the windows and watching fire. I'm a GP in that area. And we look after these people, and years later they are still traumatized. You probably may not be able to answer this because it's so different. What's the prognosis long term for mental health for these children?
I'll tell you a story, a positive story, okay? About 3 months into the process, I got a phone call was a guy, 70 years old, Israeli, said, when I was a child, I was kidnapped by the PLO. I was held in captivity for 3 weeks. And I want to come and share my story with the family. I don't know how many, some Israelis here. I didn't remember the story. I Googled, I didn't find anything. I said, he's probably crazy. But I said, okay, let's meet. Then he came, and the story goes like this. He was 16 and a half. He visited Israel with his mother and his 2 sisters. His father stayed in the United States. And his airplane was kidnapped and landed in Jordan. And after a week in the desert in Jordan, he was separated from his mother and children and sisters and taken with 5 other adults, American adults, to an apartment in Amman. And then he saw in the TV that the planes were bombed, explode, and he thought his mother and sister were killed. And then Black September 1970 came, where King Hussein was fed up with the PLO, and there was fights all over him, and rockets and whatever, and shooting, and then he was freed. And he's now 70 years old. He's the CEO of a high-tech company in Israel. He has children and grandchildren. And the first thing after we realized the story is real and whatever, we asked him, okay, what helped you? And he said the following 2 sentences. First of all, I still have my scars, and sometimes I have nightmares. But even with my scar, I had a very good life. And the second thing, he said, one thing I remember, is probably the only good thing that Richard Nixon has done. When he came back to the United States, he was invited to the White House to meet the president. And he still remembers it, 55 years later. So the first thing we've done, we organized for all the children to meet the Mujia. And the second thing, we brought him to meet the parents. The most emotional evening, one of the most emotional evenings in my life. I had some others with some of the parents of the hostages who came back. And he told them, he stand before the parents and said, look on me. Be optimistic. The problem is that we could not really start the rehabilitation process, which I believe that when it will start, will be successful. In order to start the healing, we need 3 things to happen. First of all, we need all the hostages back. Without them coming back, we could not start the healing process, and we need to say it clear and loud. Second, we need to stop the war. And third, we need to do a true investigation of what happened. Because without doing a true, what we call the Va'adat Hakira Mamlachtit, or the National Investigation Inquiry, without it, they will never regain trust. Not only them, the people who live there. And as long as we don't do those 3, and I don't care if it became political or not, I'm saying it everywhere I speak, without doing those 3, we could not start the healing process. When we do those 3, and we start the healing process, I'm optimistic. That's why I'm a social worker. I believe that at the end, they will always have their scars, but they could live with the scars later on, just as we've seen victims of child maltreatment and other things that we did. Please.
I mean, as a Bible reader, I do read about Jacob's trouble, which is with us now, and I'm just wondering, there will be wars, God may go. How are you kind of adapting yourself? Are you just looking for absolute peace? Suddenly Israel's at peace. That will be, but there'll be wars again. Do you not think it?
There is a big difference between a war. I had my share of wars. I'm a colonel of the IDF. I was never a social worker in the fighting conflict. So I had my share. War is one thing. I'll tell you another thing. Soldiers who were taking hostages is one thing. Civilians, children, women who were taken out of their beds in their house is something we never dealt with. None of the Western countries never dealt with. So there were the Boko Haram, and there were later on I learned there was a huge hostages crisis in Malaysia and other places. This is something we don't know in the Western world since the Holocaust. And it's a totally different ballgame. And therefore, soldiers is one thing, but civilians and children and women is a total different thing. We need to heal those people, and we need to do a better job in safeguarding ourselves.
I think it's peace in the heart of God, in the end, immoral.
Okay, I do.
Which I think is extremely interesting. Can you tell us a little about your work in the non-mainstream Jewish communities, Druzim, Bedouin?
Yes, I'll tell it that way. First of all, among the 38 children who came back from captivity, 2 were Bedouins. Aisha, and I always forget the name of her brother, which is totally inappropriate for. They came back, they left their father and older brother there, and they got them back as bodies. They were murdered. They left them, hugged them, and said, "We'll see you back at home." By the way, one of the lessons somebody asked me about on stage, Aisha, all the kids who came back were sent to hospitals for 2 or 3 days for examination. The uncle of Aisha was unwilling that she would go to the hospital. Said that there's something that if they happen, better not to know. And it took me and Karmit and the social worker and some others more than a day of talking with him when we knew she's coming to convince him that she would go for Soroka. She's the only one who went to Soroka and not to this hospital in the center. That she would go to Soroka for at least a few hours of a brief examination, and then they were sent back to the family. And we are still escorting them and working with them in social work. So that's one. Second, there is severe trauma among the Arab population in Israel. First of all, on October 7th, the terrorists didn't differ. They murdered Palestinians from Jerusalem, they murdered Bedouins, they murdered people from Nepal. You could see that they had nothing to do with Israel. Look on them and you'll see that they're not Israelis. Then in the north, when the north was evacuated, strangely enough, I'm trying to be critical, but not too critical. Strangely enough, none of the Arab localities was evacuated. Okay, you would argue till tomorrow that they are further away from the border, closer to the border. They died. They were bombed, and Arab civilians died in the north. Many of them. And the state didn't. And this even before the Druze in Majid Shams. Even, in the regular Arab population, in Iksal and other places, bombs fell and people died. They were not evacuated. So the trauma is for everybody. One of the groups we are going to operate next year is about how to deal with the new trauma among the Arab population in Israel, which nobody speaks about. But it's there. So yes, we are working all of them. And the same is with the ultra-Orthodox, all of us complaining for good reason that they don't go to the army. But some of them were murdered. Some of them were attacked, Fakim. One of the biggest mistakes after October 7th was the mayor of Fakim. Took him 3 months to admit he made a mistake, but not even, publicly. He had this term saying, Fakim is a city of Giborim, of heroes. Fakim here shel Giborim. He said, are you crazy? 20 people, more than 20 people were murdered. Everybody remember Rachel Edry, who convinced the terrorists not to kill her and gave them cookies until her son came and saved her with his fellow officer in the police. But 20-something people were murdered in Ofakim. And he said, no, we are not talking about it. It's a city of heroes. We are heavily involved in Ofakim, the School of Social Work. We are escorting the social services there. We are only starting to deal with our. So yeah, all the walks of the Israeli society. Yes, please, one more.
Just want to ask you, the implications that you've raised, the far-reaching implications, just extraordinary.
Yeah.
Mind-blowing. And I'm wondering, when you talk about the breakdown in trust of young people, how much anger plays a part? Because I would have thought, now that you've opened my mind to so much, that anger must be a big thing.
Even more than anger, it's total mistrust. Not only by I'll tell you another story. The principal of Nofe Absor. Nofe is the high school of the Regional Council of Eshkol. It's a school that lost on October 7 9 students that were murdered, another 11 were kidnapped, and about 100 students and teachers lost a direct family member. Because that's the regional council that serves Be'eri and Nir Oz and Kisufim and Nachal Oz, except Faraz are all the unfortunate names are in that school. So the principal of that school is my brother. He decided to be a Zionist. He was the director of a big high school in Jerusalem. He heard that they are looking for a director in October, so he stepped down and said, I'm going to. He was elected and he served. When the last ceasefire came, the teachers in the school came to him and said, we don't want to teach in that day physically, we want to teach in Zoom. He said, why? He said, because our experience shows that whenever there is a ceasefire, in that day they are sending as many as possible rockets just before the ceasefire. So he said, okay, sounds reasonable. Let me check. He went to check, came back and told them, sorry, I'm not allowed to do that. So the teacher asked him why. The regional council and the army said that they have no intelligence that anything is going to happen. The teachers almost killed him, physically. So the level of mistrust and the fact that we are unwilling to investigate what happened and that people are not taking responsibility. For me, anybody from the young officer that was in charge on that night on listening till the prime minister, anybody that was involved in October 7 needs to step down. It's clear as, it's a total failure. If only we would have 200 soldiers more there, nothing would have happened. Soldiers would have been killed, but civilians would have been kidnapped and things would have happened the way they happened. And as long as that doesn't happen, the level of mistrust, I don't care about anger. Anger is the next, it will be better when they will be angry with me. Yeah. They don't count me, they don't trust me, they don't trust anybody. And for good reason. And it's not that Israel in the other thing, they still didn't find the director general for the Minheret Kumar, they call it. Now they found somebody. After a year, there was nobody. There's nobody who runs the Northern office that needs to help people go back to their settlements and help them. The money doesn't go anywhere. Some of the funders invested, I don't know how much money. There's about $1 billion new Israeli shekels in a new foundation that Michal Herzog promoted. None of it was spent yet. Everybody is building bureaucracy on how to spend the money. It's crazy. And sometimes you just need to go and do it. Just like the story I told you, come, tell them what do you need. I am not telling you what to do. Tell me what you need, I'll help you. I went to some of the foundations in Israel, including my home foundation, the Schusterman Foundation, which I have a very close relationship with. And I told them, you really want to do something? How many high schools or schools at large are in the Gaza area? 10 high schools and elementary schools together. Go to each of the principals of each of the school and give him 50,000 shekels, unrestricted budget to do whatever he thinks needs to be done. So he told me, how could we trust him that he will do the right thing? So you trust him in educating 1,000 kids and you don't trust him in 50,000 shekels? Cut the bureaucracy. Let him do whatever he needs. Or give it him in 2 installments. Give 25, see that you did give the other 25. Nobody to speak with. The bureaucracy is unbelievable. But I remind you the story of the guy who came back from captivity as an optimistic story. I believe that when we will settle down and we'll start the treatment, they will always have scars, but they will be able to live with the scar, and the vast majority of them, not all of them, vast majority of them will have a healthy and good life. And we have the professional knowledge. We need to think out of the box, we need to be creative, we need to admit that some things we don't know, and we need to listen to them. The children, the families, the people, and try to help them. If we do that, 10 years from now, we'll be in a much better state, I hope.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you. First, a big thank you to the speaker, Professor Ben-Arieh. It's been a real privilege to be in something in the emotional talk 7th October, not just on those directly affected ones, the population. I've heard lots about it over the last more than 18 months now, but really interesting. We're also aware that your innovative work, the work of the many NGOs that are working with you in Israel, in providing support to those coping with trauma, only really begins when the fighting stops. As you said, the fighting has to stop because that's my name, otherwise nothing can begin. And we all share your hope that at least some of the groundbreaking innovations and innovative methods that you're developing do help. Not all of them, I'm sure will, as you say, but at least if some do, it will have been a good thing. So thank you for coming. Thank you, Mark, and your family for supporting Hebrew U and these events and making them happen. As your support is greatly appreciated. Thank you to JW3 and Zema for hosting us. We're always very grateful for our partnership, and news of our next event will come out soon
At some stage.
at some stage. This year, as we said right at the beginning, marks the 100th anniversary of the opening of the Hebrew University, which was Israel's first university. There's plenty of celebratory events happening this year. And if you're not on our digital newsletter list, then you can register on our website to learn more. And thank you to the British Friends team, particularly to one and a half Maria, for your professionalism and hard work making all this happen. And thank you mostly to all of you coming along tonight and supporting us and learning something. It's great, and let's hope for all more peaceful times.
Amen.
And then to the bloodshed and for the hostages to come out.
Amen.